Shadows in perspective. So I'm going to start off with just a little physical demonstration with a light, and I'm going to just shine this light and move it around this object so you can see what happens to that shadow and what that shadow looks like based upon the position of the light. Remember, how do we calculate shadows? We find certain points on that object and then we reconnect those points somewhere on the ground plane using lines that connect directly to our light source point, and then intersecting those lines with shadow lines. So I'm going to go ahead and do a quick demonstration of how this looks in perspective. So I'm going to make a box here in 2-point perspective real quick. And you want to make sure that you draw through the box because you want to be able to associate all points of your box to either your light source point or your shadow vanishing point. Once you've done that, determine where you want your light source point to be. Kind of observe in the sky in front of you where that point is, and then make an approximate point on your sheet of paper. You may need additional sheets of paper depending on how high that light source is above the horizon line. When you have made up your decision, you have positioned your light source point where you need it to be, then you drop a line straight down vertically until it hits the horizon line, and where it intersects the horizon line, that is where you have your shadow vanishing point. The shadows are going to be radiating from the shadow vanishing point, moving away from that shadow vanishing point. And so you'll be drawing lines to that shadow vanishing point out from the object. And those lines are going to be intersecting lines that come from the light source point up here. And where those intersections happen, that's where you are making points. You're merely making points. You're merely making the connection of where that point on that box happens to fall on the ground plane. So once I've drawn my light lines through the top corners of my box, and I'm going to draw my shadow lines through the bottom corners of the box. And really the principle behind doing shadows is finding those points in space, and light lines come from the light source through those points, and shadow lines will go through those points as it's associated to the ground plane. So because this box is on the ground plane, we can simply draw our shadows straight from where the box connects to the ground plane. And where you find those points, then you simply connect the dots between those points, and that gives you general shadow area. And then just keep in mind that everything that's away from the light is going to get shadow, including the back side of the box, and everything that's in front of the light is going to get light. Now we're going to take the shape, and now we're going to do something different. We're going to have the light source be coming from behind the viewer, so we can't see the light source in front of us anywhere. There's nowhere on our page where we can plot this point. So as a result of this, the way that we do this is that everything has to be in reverse. So instead of the light source point being above the horizon line, and instead of your shadows moving away from the shadow vanishing point, now you're going to be flipping everything. So because the light source is behind us, we're going to put the light source point beneath the horizon line, and we're going to flip horizontally where that shadow vanishing point should be. So the shadows are going to be moving toward the shadow vanishing point instead of away from the shadow vanishing point. So whichever direction you want your shadows to go, that's where you place your shadow vanishing point. Once you've placed your shadow vanishing point, you draw a line straight down, just like you would if it were a light source that's in front of the viewer. And it's on this point beneath the horizon line that you draw your light source point. Now, remember, this is key, absolute key. Your light line still must go through the top corners of your object. Do not get that flipped. If you get it flipped, you're going to get the wrong answer. So your shadow lines are still going to go through the base, but now they're going to go up towards the shadow vanishing point. And you want to make sure you get all 3 shadow lines in. And then your light lines are still going to go to the light source point, but now they're going to go down to the light source point because of its new direction. And this is going to get a shadow. You see where these points intersect. This is going to give you a shadow. And if done properly, then the shadow will look like it's moving away from you towards a place behind the object. Now we're going to take these posts and the sign, and we're going to find its shadow. So once again, I'm going to draw lines to the shadow vanishing point. But once I've changed planes, I'm going a different direction, I have to draw those shadow lines down the surface of the plane in order to properly calculate the continual movement of those shadow lines. Now I'm not going to see that part of the shadow, but I still have to draw those lines in order to calculate them. And then I draw them out until they hit any kind of interrupting surface. If my light lines and my shadow lines do not intersect by this point, what that means is I have to now change directions and move up whatever obstacle happens to be in the way. So here I'm going to draw some light lines, which are going to go through the top segments of this pole, and where those light lines intersect my blue lines going up the wall, that will be the end of the pole. In order to find where those points intersect the sign, I have to find the association of the sign to the ground plane. So I'm going to drop a line straight down from the edges of the sign until it hits the ground plane. And just to double check, I'm going to cross-reference this and find the exact center point. That way I can extend a line from the vanishing point out in order for that to be correct. Okay, and I'll do the same here on the other side. Drop that line down. And it's where it connects to the ground plane. That's where I draw my shadow line, is that association with the ground plane. That's very important. So find where it's associated with the ground plane and draw it across until you hit that wall, and then you go up the wall until you hit your two intersecting light line points, and that gives you both the top and bottom of that sign. So remember, you're connecting the dots, so those are the lines that you draw, is the connection between the points. That gives you the shape of the shadow on the wall as well as the shape of the shadow on the ground plane. Remember, when you fill in your shadow area, that when you have one light source, you're going to only have one shadow area. So wherever you have shadows that kind of fall on top of each other, just fill that in as a single shadow. There's not duplicate shadows here, it's just one shadow area. And once you have done that, this is how you would properly calculate an object shining a shadow on a wall when the light source is behind the viewer.